Good evening. Thank you to the Board of Education and Chairperson Valancourt for inviting us to speak one final time this school year. Thank you to the superintendent for providing us with staff time and the data necessary for our committee to answer outstanding questions that came up through the year. Most importantly, we'd like to thank our OBRC committee members, the majority of whom are in attendance this evening.
Yeah, I see a lot of them.
Raise their hand.
Everyone stand up.
We estimate that our 17 committee appointees have volunteered over 1,500 hours in researching, discussing, and evaluating the operating budget for the Board of Education. Our members understood and took very seriously the importance of our task, and our attendance was very high through our last meeting, June 12th. The following is our spring OBRC strategic report.
With a projected structural deficit of $50 million and a deferred maintenance exceeding $500 million, our school system is in a financial crisis. The OBRC has now been through 2 budget cycles since its reconstitution by the current board, first with the prior administration and now with the current administration. Although different, both budgets continue to represent a financial oversight and management accountability shortfall that requires a desperately needed paradigm shift. During the course of our review process, we have observed several major themes that continue to present a challenge in the examination and validation of the information that is present. These themes center around the absence of a strategic plan that informs the allocation of resources year over year, the truncated time frame in which each annual operating budget is presented and reviewed, the absence of a continual review and correction of the HCPSS's financial well-being throughout the budget year, the absence of immediately available data to support the conclusions presented, the absence of a robust system of accountability for major budget categories, the absence of industry standard benchmark analysis against which HCPSS performance is measured, public expectations related to education in Howard County, including such initiatives as investing in new schools, reducing the number of portable classrooms, addressing the staggering amount of deferred maintenance, eliminating the health fund deficit, significantly reducing class size, fully providing for special education, fairly compensating teachers, successfully launching innovative programs such as Jumpstart, and ensuring equity for all students exceed the resources allocated for education. It's imperative that HCPSS demonstrate that it is an effective and efficient steward of the resources it has been provided, and that HCPSS provide the foundation for advocating for and securing additional resources in the very near future. As an advisory body to the board, the OBRC is charged with examining the operating budget and its execution. We have found that the budget falls short as a tool to benefit our students and the community. To regain the community's confidence, it's imperative that HCPSS demonstrate effective and efficient stewardship of its resources. The failure to act on your required fiduciary responsibility will be a betrayal of our children and our mission. We strongly urge the Board of Education to take steps to change the culture of the business operations of our schools. We call for the board to require that HCPSS develop a 5-year budget that includes measurable quarterly and annual goals. To that end, the board should be fully and substantially engaged in the development of the long-range strategic plan, and these recommendations should be part of that engagement. The following recommendations are the OBRC's response to the themes mentioned above.
First, we'd like to make some strategic recommendations about revenue. The OBRC recognizes the need for all programs to be structured in a way that makes them as efficient as possible, while demonstrating through performance measures and best practices that the outcomes of those programs have the appropriate positive impact. In examining multiple areas of the budget over the past 2 cycles, the OBRC believes that there is room for improvement in these efficiencies and their impact. The OBRC has also come to realize that the current deficit situation cannot be completely solved within the context of program cuts, program reorganization, or the freezing of all new initiatives that may provide positive impact to our students and community. County government should recognize the efforts being made by many groups to improve the budget efficiencies of the school system, while noting that additional funding from government sources must be a priority to ensure the best result for all stakeholders involved. Therefore, the OBRC recognizes that the county and its elected officials will need to take on the responsibility for improving the funding needed to keep HCPSS moving in a positive direction as one of the premier systems in the nation. To increase revenue. Simply stated, Howard County is underfunding HCPSS budget. The consequences of this underfunding are larger class sizes, deferred cost-saving investments, turnover of faculty and staff, reduced morale, and the declining reputation of our school system. We believe that this approach will have a negative impact on our students who only go through our system once. It also will have other negative consequences for our community. The current deficit situation cannot be completely solved by program cuts, program reorganization, or freezing of all new initiatives. The OBRC recommends that the Board of Ed and HCPSS annually make a persuasive, compelling, and exceedingly public case for adequate revenue based on data-driven best practices. A maintenance of effort approach to the budgeting will not be adequate to support the required innovations within Howard County Public Schools. Some of the steps. The OBRC calls on the Board of Education to advocate to the Howard County government to increase its revenue streams so that it can effectively support HCPSS to the level expected by its citizens. The OBRC believes the current new development and resale impact fees do not generate sufficient revenue to cover the additional education costs. The OBRC calls on the Board of Ed to request an immediate increase in these fees from the Howard County delegation to levels similar to the surrounding counties. OBRC calls on the HCPSS administration to aggressively increase grant writing opportunities. The OBRC asks the HCPSS leadership to refocus the Bright Minds Foundation to produce income for the schools at least equal to similar foundations nationally. The OBRC also recommends looking at efforts for generating revenue for specific programs that are tangential to the core mission of our schools. Next recommendations are for specific divisions and areas. We will start with business and technology. The Board of Education should not increase funding for curriculum and business operation technology above the FY18 actuals until a board-approved plan is in place with performance measures and outcomes specified, finalized, and agreed upon. The approved plan must include projections for maintenance, replacement, upgrades, and training for at least 3 years. The approved plan must also include how the school system will leverage and measure technology to improve academic delivery and instruction. The approved plan must provide clarity on the budgets for instructional and business technology. Howard County Public School System should perform best practice review of all of like-size organizations to review opportunities to bundle, outsource, etc., to achieve effectiveness and efficiencies of outcomes and fiscal responsibilities. Divisions should be required to submit agreed-upon supportive data that point to how category initiatives support overall system strategic plan with key performance metrics. This will aid the Board of Education in prioritizing new initiatives and retiring existing programs.
Under the category of Human Resources and Leadership Development, the OBRC recommends that HCPSS develop a strategic staffing plan. The OBRC recognizes that the following recommendation is a huge shift in how the HCPSS addresses the alignment of resources and needs in the hiring and placement of teachers. However, these changes will positively affect change within the school system. The recommendation is implement a staffing model based on teacher experience for individual schools that incorporates an assumption of the need for more experienced staff based on higher levels of farm students. The OBRC further recommends that this curve be leveraged by the administration in teacher assignments to create more deliberative staffing of experienced teachers at schools with higher levels of farm students. Finally, the OBRC recommends that the administration annually report on the degree to which individual schools differ from the model shape curve and what plans are in place to address. The recommendation is the result of examining the budget with an eye toward equity. Multiple studies show that teachers increase in effectiveness throughout their careers. While all of our schools require an effective mix of teachers with varying levels of experience, it appears that schools with higher levels of farm students in Howard County have a lower mix of more experienced teachers. When looking at the salary mix of teachers at individual schools, we are effectively spending the least at schools with the high levels of farm students and the most at schools with low levels of farm students. With a deliberative effort to ensure more experienced teachers at these schools, HCPSS will address one of the factors contributing to the current achievement gap. The concentration of experienced teachers in better resource schools is counter to this goal. HCPSS should gather additional data to improve and expand the above recommendation to apply to other high needs groups, such as special education and English language learners. During negotiation for the teachers' collective bargaining agreement, the hiring step cap can be lowered from step 18 to a step benchmark. Other counties are using step 10 or 12. Unless the position is determined through a needs assessment that would be created to be a critical position. And under school management and instructional leadership, the OBRC recommends a macro-level review and analysis to determine and report all existing and proposed FY19 high schools and middle school courses and sections in the buildings with 15 or fewer students enrolled. We further recommend high school-wide coordination to incorporate live digital offerings to reduce the impact of inefficient staffing of low enrollment courses and ensure equitable countywide offerings that are currently not available at every high school. The Board of Education should require the superintendent to have specific staffing requirements for general education and special education students with defined targets for all classrooms addressing overcrowding and understaffing of all classrooms. Staffing metrics should be established and transparent to address these concerns. Under academics, school improvement, curricular programs, and accountability, the OBRC strongly recommends HCPSS develop and implement a comprehensive, measurable strategic plan that incorporates digital learning instructional offerings fully into the overall HCPSS curriculum. Howard County Public Schools lags behind other school systems in Maryland as well as around the country in the implementation of digital learning. With the exception of a relatively small number of course offerings, Howard County Public Schools has failed to leverage the potential of digital learning to increase both the variety and flexibility of courses, as well as to reduce the associated cost of instructional delivery. Other systems are using digital learning to offer more flexibility to home and hospital students, as well as those serving suspensions. Other systems are using digital learning to reduce the impact of snow days and other school closures. Other school systems are using digital learning to increase the variety of courses offered by combining students from multiple schools. This has the additional advantage of ensuring that all students at all schools have access to the same robust set of course offerings. Howard County Public Schools must invest to do the same. A common objection to digital learning is that it is not as effective as traditional classroom instruction. The problem is that budget realities are going to place increased pressure to eliminate many of the optional courses that enroll small numbers of students at each school. The question to ask of digital learning is not whether it compares to classroom instruction, but rather is it better than entirely eliminating an offering altogether. The OBRC recommends that dual enrollment be piloted and evaluated based on its academic potential and not leveraged as a mechanism to address school overcrowding. Dual enrollment has been implemented throughout the country, and the general evaluation appears to be positive. For example, students who enroll in community colleges were 2.5 times more likely to achieve an associate's degree in 2 years if they had participated in a dual enrollment program in high school. The success of dual enrollment shows significant variance by state, and so the OBRC concurs with the decision by Howard County Public Schools to pilot the effort before deciding on a model to implement system-wide. In the event the pilot is successful, Howard County Public Schools should develop and implement a plan to offer dual enrollment throughout the county. If this pilot proves to be successful, then the partnership between HCPSS and Howard Community College needs to be funded equitably from each organization's budget. Using dual enrollment or Jumpstart as a voluntary mechanism for redistricting adds significant cost for transportation and complicates what may become a worthwhile program to be offered at all high schools. It is unfortunate that HCPSS initiated this effort for the 2018-2019 school year, and it will certainly make it challenging to unroll this, as students who enter the program in 2018-2019 should have the opportunity to continue it through high school. At the same time, we would recommend a plan be developed now to address this for the 2019-2020 school year and beyond.
The following is some recommendations in operations. With a deferred maintenance deficit of $0.5 billion, the board should undertake a major review of the deferred maintenance report in order to understand process and procedures. The Facilities and Maintenance Committee should be reconstituted and charged with providing recommendations to the superintendent on the state of deferred maintenance and the school's most critical maintenance needs so that decisions can be made strategically and our buildings do not further decline. Building Services should develop a plan with specific objectives and measures for items such as custodial ratios, formulas for staffing custodial needs to be revisited and better aligned with best practices. Along with square footage, new schools with specialized lighting, educational outdoor space, courtyards should be considered in the staffing allocations. Percentage of lighting, LED or special lighting. Revisit the LED lighting and other cost savings and leverage BG&E rebates and incentives. Look at outdoor educational spaces. Look at courtyard safety and standards for those educational spaces. Employee safety and preventive measures to protect our employees and keep workers' compensation claims to a minimum. Contracted versus in-house cost benefit analysis. The OBRC continues to work on additional recommendations in operations and in special education, as well as general recommendations. Unfortunately, these areas have not been formalized as of our meeting date with the Board of Education. These details will be shared with the FY20 OBRC for future presentation to the board.
Thank you again to the Board of Education for giving the OBRC the opportunity to present this evening. The OBRC hopes that the good work of this committee will continue and that the board sees the value in having a community-based committee devoted to evaluating the operating budget. Thank you to Superintendent Martirano and the staff of Howard County Public Schools for giving their time and resources to allow the OBRC to provide additional perspective to the operating budget. And finally, thank you to the members of the OBRC for the many, many hours of hard work they have volunteered in service to Howard County Public Schools.
Well, thank you all very much. And on behalf of the board, thank you to the committee. And we are aware of the tremendous amount of time and effort that you all have put into this. And the recommendations throughout the budget process were helpful, timely. I think we used quite a few of them, and we are grateful to you for your candid evaluation. Does Ms. Ellis?
I would like to add my thanks to the committee, to all of you for the work that you have done. This is really, really great. You know, about a year and a half ago, we called for this committee to be reauthorized. And now that we have a report, I'm not sure what the process is to make sure that the recommendations are looked at seriously as we move forward. Okay, because I mean, so much, you have so much in here that we really need to do. We need to look at. I'm just not sure how we move forward to make sure that these things get considered as we move forward.
I'm not sure if Ms. Delmont Small has an answer to your, Ms. Delmont Small.
Thank you. Before I answer my colleague's question, I too want to thank you all very, very, very much. I know how difficult the job is, and you have provided us with some amazing information, and this goes to what my colleague was saying, okay, what next? I would like to see the report that they've provided to us and the other pieces that will be coming that you mentioned regarding operations and special education, to springboard a discussion for this board and the superintendent to have a work session perhaps and invite the OBRC to join us so that we can start talking through what are we going to do. Because as you have well pointed out, we have needs and then there's funding, and those two are not equal. And since we are not a funding authority, there is only so much we can do, because the reality will be if we don't get the money from the county, we're going to have to do some reallocation. And that reallocation piece fits into what we want education in Howard County to look like, because the superintendent and the board, we want the best possible for our students. But how we get there, I'm going to go out on a limb, is going to look different than what we're doing today. So I would like to see us have a work session and sit down and have maybe chat a little bit more about details, as well as having the superintendent bring some of his concerns and ideas to the table as well. That would be my suggestion.
Dr. Martirano?
I'm extremely excited about this. And so the first step to recovery is acknowledging you have a problem. And so when I apply that philosophy to my entire tenure here, I've inherited a system that's been in crisis. I mean, if we talk about this report, you talk about crisis and that word. I just gave a very lengthy interview with the Baltimore Sun, capping off the transition and the inheritance of a system in crisis, and talked very explicitly about our challenges. Number one on the list was the concerns with the budget that needs additional sunshine on this particular topic, and I welcome any recommendations from any source. But I say that with a sense of urgency now, defining it as we move forward with the input, as I'm shifting internal operations to be more accountable and more focused regarding every dollar that we have. Under the direction of our Assistant Superintendent of Administration, we're having monthly meetings with our chiefs in a very futuristic look in terms of strategic planning. My hope is that we have, over my 4 years as superintendent, a budget that builds each year, not in terms of isolation, that has a connection. We already started to begin to set that foundation for this year. It's my hope that all those recommendations could now, I would appreciate if we could get an agreed upon subset of the OBRC to meet with us on a regular basis, not the entire crowd, but groups that we can begin to say, how can we memorialize, building upon what you've said, to get some action. So as we begin the process of building the budget, which is happening now, I mean, we're accelerating the agenda technically and tactically to bring the budget forward to the board before winter break. When you think about back mapping that work is beginning now. We're not even fully implementing. It's not even July 1, and my head is already in that next fiscal year. I'd always rest in 3 fiscal years, the past, the present, and the future, as we move it forward. And all of these are very instructive recommendations, but I don't want them to pass through without formal acknowledgement and formal action as we begin that development process. And quite frankly, it gives me great credibility as I advance that from the input from the community. You and I have had conversation regarding the revenue piece. That is a conversation where my head is right now, quite frankly, regarding how do we look at this piece of this budget, and to use the expression, just what it costs to feed the beast is more than maintenance of effort, because of the reliance on what we have expected as a service delivery model for our school system. And we can get into all the other pieces of information specifically, but I just want to echo, I mean, I'm sorry I'm jumping in here on the board members' report, knowing that this is one of their official committees, is that I'm looking forward to the opportunity, the continuation of the dialogue and the collaboration, but in a more specific level of what those strategies are. And again, I'll end where I start. Thank you for bringing these things forward, many of which I know already, but shining the light on them and having honest discussions about it and putting in actionable steps. That's the only way we're going to shift this paradigm. And my frustration is predicated on the fact of continuing to do the same thing every year, relying on the same process and getting the same results. We cannot continue that, as I have great level of objectivity now and reflection, because coming through that 1 year cycle and inheriting the system at the end of the one cycle, making modifications and adjustments to balance it, and now coming through a different cycle is extremely critical as we move forward to the next one. So I want to thank you, but also with a high ask for let's get those meetings scheduled, let's get a structure to address and unpack those as it inserts itself in the structure that I've already applied internally to review our long-term planning for the next budget cycle.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Martorano. Ms. Coombs?
Again, thank you for all of the time that you guys have put in. I know that you've gone over it and combed and tried to find everything, and that you've had really good, robust discussion amongst yourselves. And I've really appreciated the rationale that you provide us with your comments, because it's not just do this, but there's some thought behind it, and I appreciate that extra level of attention, of detail. But I do want the public to realize that we are $500 million in deferred maintenance. That's stuff that's not happening in our schools. And we know that, Ms. Klaus has described, some of the issues with trying to attract, the workforce. And, so a couple of these ratios, we're doing a lot with very little. And $500 million of deferred maintenance, that is stuff in our 70-plus buildings that is not getting done. And the public needs to understand that and help us, because it's just a waiting game. I mean, there's going to be stuff that happens and that you've got to deal with, a chiller breaks, or, there's a kiln that goes down. So people really need to understand that there's work that's not occurring to take care of our facilities. And it's not our fault, but people need to recognize that it's not happening.
Well, it's like your own house. If you put it off until it's a crisis, then it costs more. All right, anybody else? Well, thank you all very much. We had a little conversation, and our intention is to develop a schedule of for some work sessions with you all to really start acting on in preparation for the next cycle and keep building.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.